For 6 years, the world had not seen Susan Boyle perform live. The woman whose voice once shocked millions of people had quietly disappeared from the stage. After suffering a stroke in 2022, many believed her story had reached its final chapter. Doctors warned that the damage might never fully heal. The left side of her face struggled to move, her speech became difficult, and the voice that had once filled theaters around the world sounded weak and broken. For someone whose entire life had been built around singing, the possibility of losing her voice felt almost unbearable. Yet in February 2026, a surprising announcement brought her name back into headlines again. Simon Cowell revealed that he wanted Susan Boyle to return for the biggest anniversary season of Britain's Got Talent ever. Suddenly, fans everywhere began asking the same question: could she really come back? To understand why this moment matters so much, you have to go back to the beginning of her life, long before the world ever knew her name. Susan Magdalene Boyle was born on April 1, 1961, in the small Scottish town of Blackburn in West Lothian. She was the youngest of 9 children in a modest Catholic family. Their house was often crowded, filled with conversation, noise, and strong religious faith. Her mother, Bridget, was already 47 when she became pregnant again, and doctors warned her that continuing the pregnancy could be dangerous. They advised her to end it because the risks were too high, but Bridget refused. Her faith was strong, and she believed the child deserved to live. The birth was difficult. Serious complications forced doctors to perform emergency surgery, and during those frightening moments, Susan was briefly deprived of oxygen. She was extremely small and struggled to breathe after birth. For a while, she had to remain in an incubator while her parents waited anxiously. Doctors eventually told the family something that would follow Susan for decades. They believed the oxygen problem had caused brain damage. Today, many specialists believe that diagnosis was incorrect, but in the early 1960s, medical understanding was limited, and once such a label was given, it stayed. Throughout her childhood, Susan carried the weight of that misunderstanding. Teachers treated her differently. Classmates mocked her and called her cruel names like Susie Simple. What began as teasing gradually became daily bullying that chipped away at her confidence. School became a lonely place. Many children laughed when she struggled with certain lessons. Some teachers assumed she would never achieve much and offered little support. The constant judgment made her feel isolated and anxious. Yet despite the pain she experienced during those years, something powerful was growing quietly inside: music. Her father, Patrick, worked as a coal miner and had served during the Second World War, but he loved singing in his spare time. Sometimes he performed at a local pub in their community, and Susan listened closely whenever he sang. Those moments became a source of comfort. While the outside world often made her feel small, music gave her a place where she felt safe. When she was around 12 years old, she began singing at school and in her church choir. Teachers quickly noticed the unusual strength in her voice. It was rich and emotional, far more powerful than most children her age. For the first time in her life, people were praising her rather than doubting her. Church became her safe space. As the years passed, she continued practicing and dreaming quietly about becoming a professional singer, but life did not make that dream easy. Susan spent much of her adulthood caring for her mother, Bridget, who became increasingly ill over time. They shared a deep bond, and Susan often said her mother was the one person who truly believed in her talent. In the mid-1990s, Susan began taking formal vocal lessons with a coach named Fred O'Neill in Livingston, Scotland. For nearly 6 years, he helped train her voice, teaching breathing techniques, vocal control, and performance discipline. He believed she had a remarkable mezzo-soprano voice capable of touching audiences around the world. But recognition still felt far away. In 1995, she auditioned for a television program called My Kind of People, hosted by Michael Barrymore. She hoped the opportunity might finally launch her career. Instead, she was rejected. The disappointment was painful, but not surprising. Over the years, she had become used to doors closing in front of her. Still, she refused to stop trying. In 1998, she spent her own savings recording a small demo at a Scottish studio. She sang songs like Cry Me a River, Killing Me Softly, and Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. She mailed copies to record companies and television programs, hoping someone might notice her voice. No one responded. By the year 2000, Susan was nearly 40 years old and still living quietly in Blackburn. She sang mostly at church events and small local gatherings. The dream of becoming a professional singer seemed to be fading. Yet one promise kept her going. Her mother had always told her never to give up on her voice. When Bridget passed away in 2007 after years of illness, Susan felt completely lost. For a while, she stopped singing altogether. But slowly, she remembered the encouragement her mother had given her throughout life. Determined to honor that belief, she decided to try one more time. 2 years later, in 2009, she applied for auditions for a television show called Britain's Got Talent. Susan Boyle was 47 years old when she walked onto that stage in Glasgow. She wore a simple beige dress and looked nothing like the glamorous performers people usually expected from talent shows. When she told the judges that she dreamed of becoming as successful as musical theater star Elaine Paige, some audience members laughed. Even the judges seemed doubtful. But everything changed the moment the music started. Susan began singing I Dreamed a Dream from the musical Les Miserables. Within seconds, the laughter disappeared. Her voice filled the entire theater with strength and emotion, carrying years of struggle in every note. The judges looked stunned. The audience rose to their feet before she even finished the final line. That single performance became one of the most famous moments in television history. Millions watched it online within days. The clips spread across the internet and quickly reached hundreds of millions of viewers worldwide. Almost overnight, the quiet woman from Blackburn became a global sensation. But the fame that followed would bring both incredible success and overwhelming pressure, and her greatest challenge was still waiting in the future. After that unforgettable audition in 2009, Susan Boyle's life changed faster than anyone could have imagined. Within days of the broadcast, she became one of the most talked about people in the world. Television networks across America invited her for interviews, including appearances on major programs watched by millions. Suddenly, the shy woman who had spent most of her life singing quietly in church halls was standing under bright studio lights while the world listened to her story. Later that same year, her debut album, I Dreamed a Dream, was released. The response was extraordinary. The album immediately reached #1 on music charts in several countries and sold hundreds of thousands of copies in its first week alone. By the end of the year, it had sold millions worldwide, becoming one of the fastest-selling debut albums in history. For Susan, who had once lived on a modest income and struggled to be heard, the transformation felt almost unreal. The success continued over the next several years. She released multiple albums, many of which also reached the top of international charts. By 2021, she had sold around 25 million records worldwide. The woman who had once been mocked for dreaming too big had become one of the most successful singers ever to emerge from a talent show. Yet, fame brought its own challenges. Constant media attention surrounded her life. Photographers waited outside her home. Tabloids published stories about her appearance, habits, and personal life. The sudden pressure sometimes became overwhelming, especially for someone who had spent decades living quietly. Eventually, she revealed that she had been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome in 2013, explaining that many of the difficulties she experienced with social situations came from autism-related traits, rather than the brain damage doctors had once claimed she had as a child. Despite those challenges, Susan continued recording music and performing for fans around the world. But in April 2022, everything suddenly changed again. One night, she felt completely normal. The next morning, she woke up unable to speak properly. The left side of her face had begun to droop and her body felt weak. Her manager quickly realized something was terribly wrong and rushed her for medical help. Susan Boyle had suffered a stroke. Doctors explained that the stroke had damaged muscles responsible for facial movement and speech. For a singer whose career depended entirely on her voice, the situation was devastating. Her speech became slow and slurred. Singing a simple note felt impossible. Specialists warned that permanent damage might prevent her from performing again. For the first time since her rise to fame, the future looked uncertain. But Susan had spent her entire life fighting against expectations. Instead of accepting defeat, she decided to fight back. Soon after leaving the hospital, she began an intense recovery program. She hired a private speech therapist and attended sessions several times a week. At home, she practiced exercises for hours, training her facial muscles to move correctly again. Vocal coaches helped her rebuild the strength in her voice through long daily practice sessions. Sometimes the training lasted 5 hours a day. Progress came slowly, but it came. Month by month, her speech improved. The muscles on her face gradually regained movement, and eventually, she tried something that meant everything to her: singing again. One quiet day in early 2023, she began softly singing "I Dreamed a Dream," the same song that had changed her life 14 years earlier. When the final note came out clearly, she reportedly broke down in tears. It was the moment she realized her voice was returning. Her recovery cost more than £50,000, but for Susan, the money meant nothing compared to regaining the ability to sing. Then came an emotional moment that surprised fans everywhere. On June 3, 2023, during the finale of Britain's Got Talent, Susan Boyle stepped back onto the stage where her life had first changed. She joined performers from Les Miserables and once again sang "I Dreamed a Dream." Millions watched as she delivered the song with the same passion that had stunned audiences years earlier. Near the end of the performance, she revealed that she had suffered a stroke the previous year and had fought through months of therapy just to stand there again. The audience immediately rose to its feet. The performance spread across the internet within hours, reminding the world why Susan Boyle's story had always been about resilience. Since that night, her comeback has continued to grow. By 2025, she returned to recording studios, working on new music and sharing updates with fans online. Her posts showed her smiling beside microphones and mixing boards, hinting that a new chapter of her career was beginning. Then, in early 2026, another announcement brought her story full circle. Simon Cowell revealed that the upcoming anniversary season of Britain's Got Talent would celebrate the most unforgettable performers in the show's history, and according to him, Susan Boyle was one of the most important. He said he wanted her back. Fans across the world immediately began imagining the moment she might step back onto that stage again. After surviving fame, illness, and one of the most frightening health battles of her life, the possibility of her return feels deeply emotional. She has also announced plans to perform at the Summer's End Angus Festival in August 2026, marking her first major live appearance in years. Thousands of fans are expected to attend, eager to hear the voice that once inspired the entire world. Looking back, Susan's journey has never followed the path anyone expected. From a bullied schoolgirl in Scotland to a global music star, from sudden fame to a devastating stroke, and now toward an extraordinary comeback. Her story proves something powerful. Sometimes the greatest voices are the ones that refuse to be silenced.